For decades, Mary Tyler Moore was America's unstoppable symbol of charm, independence, and limitless possibility. She made millions laugh on The Dick Van Dyke Show, inspired generations with The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and became the face of a new kind of woman on television, bold, funny, brilliant, and unafraid to stand alone. But behind the spotless smile and the iconic toss of her hat in the air, Mary carried a private darkness that the world never fully understood. A darkness that never made the headlines. Until now, what really happened in her final years? Why did her closest friends say she was fighting battles no one knew existed? And what was the mystery surrounding her health, her family, and her heartbreaking final decision to disappear from public life? For years, fans have whispered about unanswered questions. Why she suddenly withdrew from Hollywood, why her last interviews felt strangely emotional, and why those closest to her now say the truth was far more painful than anyone imagined. When the final pieces of her story came together, they revealed something devastating, something even longtime friends struggled to accept. Today, the mystery surrounding Mary Tyler Moore is finally solved, and the truth is not good. It's emotional, complicated, and deeply human, much like Mary herself. Her last years were filled with hidden struggles, unspoken regrets, and one final heartbreaking chapter that reshaped the way the world remembers her. This is the story the cameras never captured. The story Mary never wanted the world to see. Mary Tyler Moore's life always looked like a triumph, played out in real time. An actress who didn't just break barriers, but shattered them with grace and humor. She had the kind of presence that made casting directors lean forward, audiences smile instinctively, and critics agree that she was unlike anyone who came before her. But long before she became the woman who tossed her hat into the Minneapolis sky, Mary's private world was filled with early struggles that shaped her in ways very few understood. Mary grew up in a household that looked perfect from the outside, polite, traditional, respectable. But inside those walls, she often felt invisible. Her father was strict, emotionally distant, and rarely offered the affection she craved. Her mother, though loving, battled her own demons that Mary didn't fully understand until adulthood. The young girl, who would one day become the face of confidence and independence, spent her childhood absorbing tension, misunderstanding silence, and wondering why the people she loved always felt just out of reach. It was the beginning of a lifelong pattern, one where Mary learned to cope by creating a version of herself that people admired, even if it didn't match the confusion she felt inside. Her early dream wasn't even to be a comedian, it was to be a dancer. And she was extraordinary at it. Her movements were elegant, expressive, filled with the passion she couldn't always put into words. Dancing was her escape, her therapy, and her voice. But even as her talent grew, rejection followed. At 17, Mary lost a major dance opportunity because she looked too young. It was a small moment to outsiders, but to Mary, it was crushing. Another reminder that she had to shape herself into what others wanted if she hoped to survive. Hollywood changed everything, but not the way she expected. She was hired for commercials, small roles, and occasional appearances, gradually building a reputation for professionalism and charm. Yet Mary wasn't instantly confident. She worried constantly about failing, about not being good enough, about being replaced before she even had a chance to prove herself. Her trademark smile, which later became her signature, was originally her armor, an expression she used to hide the fear that lived right behind it. Then came the Dick Van Dyke Show, the opportunity that transformed her destiny. The moment she walked into the audition room, producers saw something electric, someone who seemed both wholesome and quietly rebellious. But Mary herself was terrified. She had never been asked to do comedy at that level, and she feared disappointing everyone. Still, she pushed through the anxiety, delivering a performance that instantly convinced the team she was perfect for the role of Laura Petrie. Behind the scenes, however, Mary's insecurities followed her. She worried about her timing, her voice, even her wardrobe. She once admitted that every laugh she earned felt like a temporary approval, something that could disappear if she slipped even once. But Dick Van Dyke became her anchor. His kindness and encouragement helped her grow into the confident performer millions adored. For the first time in her life, Mary felt truly seen, yet fame brought new challenges. The spotlight she had worked so hard to earn now exposed every mistake, every personal flaw, every vulnerability. Her weaknesses weren't private anymore. They became public topics, analyzed by fans and critics alike. And as her star rose, the pressure intensified. Mary tried to keep her personal struggles hidden, but cracks began to show. Even during those early Hollywood years, the mystery of Mary Tyler Moore's inner life had already begun forming. She was adored, celebrated, and praised. Yet she was fighting battles no one else could see. The seeds of the heartbreak that would later define her final years were already being planted, quietly, silently, behind the charming smile that never seemed to fade. As Mary Tyler Moore's fame continued to rise, the world saw a woman who seemed unstoppable, stylish, brilliant, endlessly confident. But while America celebrated her success, Mary's personal life was quietly unraveling. The pressure to stay perfect on camera, the emotional weight she carried from childhood, and the demands of maintaining her public image all collided in ways the public never suspected. Her marriage to Grant Tinker appeared, from the outside, to be the foundation that held her together. He was supportive, steady, and deeply admired in the industry. But Mary's insecurities didn't vanish just because she had found success. She was still learning how to believe in herself, how to accept praise without feeling like a fraud, and how to navigate the complicated world of fame. Every time she stepped on a set, she feared it might be the day people realized she wasn't as strong as they believed. These inner fears intensified when the Mary Tyler Moore Show began. The series transformed her from beloved actress into a cultural icon. She wasn't just playing a character, she was representing an entire generation of independent women. But while Mary Richards was confident, emotionally balanced, and endlessly optimistic, Mary Tyler Moore, the woman was dealing with private pain that contradicted everything her character stood for. One of her greatest heartaches was her relationship with her only child, Richie. Mary had him when she was very young, and her early years in the industry were consumed by the difficult balancing act between motherhood and ambition. She loved her son deeply, but she struggled to form the emotional connection she desperately wanted. In interviews years later, she admitted she had been distant, unsure, and overly focused on proving herself professionally. That emotional distance haunted her for the rest of her life. Then came the tragedy that forever shattered Mary's world. In 1980, her son accidentally died from a gunshot wound at just 24 years old. The news devastated millions of fans, but no one felt the impact more than Mary. She was consumed with guilt, guilt for being absent, guilt for not understanding him better, guilt for the conversations they never had. The weight of losing her child became a burden she carried for the rest of her life, a wound that never healed, and became a central piece of the mystery behind her later years. Publicly, Mary remained strong. She continued working, smiling, and giving interviews. But privately, she was drowning. Friends later revealed that she struggled for years after her son's death, often questioning everything: her career, her decisions, and even her identity. The woman who once lifted the spirits of an entire nation now found herself searching for a way back to her own. Her health struggles added another layer to the growing mystery. Mary had been battling diabetes since her early 30s, a condition that slowly intensified over the years. While she tried to stay active and healthy, the disease began affecting her eyesight, her mobility, and her independence. But Mary rarely spoke about how much pain she was in. She didn't want sympathy. She didn't want concern. She wanted to remain strong for her fans, even if it meant hiding the truth. Hollywood began to notice her withdrawal. She appeared less frequently at events, avoided long interviews, and kept her personal circle smaller than ever. Some believed she was simply tired of fame. Others thought she wanted a peaceful retirement. But those closest to her knew a far more painful truth. Mary was fighting battles that had been building for decades, battles that were slowly wearing her down. By the time she reached her later years, the mystery surrounding Mary Tyler Moore's life had deepened. She had experienced unimaginable loss, fought a lifelong illness, and struggled with emotional wounds she never fully expressed. To the public, she was still the woman who made the world laugh. But inside, Mary was carrying heartbreaks she never truly escaped. As Mary entered the last decade of her life, the emotional scars she carried began shaping her every decision. People wondered why she suddenly stepped away from Hollywood, why her appearances became rare, and why those who loved her said she was changing in a way that frightened them. The truth behind her withdrawal was far more complicated than aging or fatigue. It was a combination of illness, grief, and a quiet surrender to years of unresolved pain. Mary's health was declining faster than she publicly admitted. Her long battle with diabetes had already taken a toll on her eyesight, but now it was affecting her kidneys, her circulation, and the strength she once relied on. Simple tasks became exhausting. Walking long distances became painful. Her once bright eyes, so expressive on camera, were slowly losing their clarity. Friends later revealed that Mary refused to look weak in front of the public. She didn't want the world to remember her as someone frail or defeated. So instead of showing vulnerability, she retreated. Her final interviews reflected this shift. She appeared soft-spoken, reflective, and at times overwhelmed by emotion. Fans noticed, wondering if something deeper was happening beneath the surface. And there was. Mary was beginning to face a truth she had avoided for most of her life, that the strength she projected was built on years of pushing through heartbreak without ever truly healing from it. Her husband, Dr. Robert Levine, became her anchor during these years. He stood by her through surgeries, medical emergencies, and moments when she felt too weak to continue fighting. Yet even with his support, Mary felt increasingly isolated. She once admitted privately that she feared being remembered only for her illness rather than the decades of joy she brought the world. That fear, more than anything, pushed her to stay out of the public eye. But it wasn't just health that kept her hidden. The grief over her son's death never softened. In fact, as she aged, it deepened. Mary spent long hours reflecting on their complicated relationship, replaying moments she wished she had handled differently, and wishing she had been able to express her love more fully. She confided to a friend that losing him felt like losing a part of her soul, and that no matter how much time passed, she never forgave herself. Her emotional pain resurfaced during quiet nights at home, when the laughter, applause, and bright studio lights that once defined her life felt like memories from another world. She had lived through extraordinary success, yet she privately battled feelings of inadequacy and regret. The woman who empowered millions of women to be strong felt increasingly unsure of her own strength. By now, the mystery surrounding Mary Tyler Moore's final chapter had become almost impossible for outsiders to understand. To the public, she simply seemed retired. To those closest to her, she was a woman fighting an invisible war. She was exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Her declining health, her lifelong battle with diabetes, and her unresolved grief had all converged into one painful reality. She no longer had the energy to remain the Mary Tyler Moore the world expected. In her final years, she embraced quiet living. She spent more time at home, enjoying peaceful routines, moments with her husband, and distant memories of happier days. She avoided large gatherings, rarely spoke to the press, and surrounded herself only with people she trusted completely. But beneath that peace, her body was failing. Doctors warned her health was deteriorating quickly, and Mary understood what was coming. Yet even then, she maintained her dignity, never complaining, never asking for sympathy, and never letting the world see the full extent of her suffering. The real mystery wasn't why Mary disappeared. It was how she managed to hide so much pain for so long, and why she fought so hard to protect the world from the truth of her declining final years. In the final months of Mary Tyler Moore's life, the truth behind her long-guarded mystery finally came into focus. Those closest to her realized she had been preparing for the end long before anyone suspected. Her health was reaching a point of no return, her strength was fading, and her emotional battles, carried in silence for decades, were becoming too heavy for her to hide anymore. What emerged was a heartbreaking yet deeply human picture of a woman who had spent her life making others smile, even as her own world was slowly dimming. Mary's condition worsened significantly as complications from diabetes began affecting multiple organs. She faced recurring hospital visits, increasing mobility challenges, and a level of exhaustion that made even simple conversations difficult. Yet despite the pain, she still tried to maintain the calm, composed demeanor she had mastered over a lifetime. Nurses often said she was polite, gentle, and unfailingly gracious, even when she could barely speak. She didn't want to be remembered for her suffering. She wanted to be remembered for her strength. Her husband, Robert Levine, stayed by her side through every moment. He watched as the woman he adored, the woman who had once lit up television screens with effortless charisma, now struggled just to sit upright. He later admitted that Mary tried to reassure everyone around her, even in her weakest moments. It was her nature, protecting others from pain, even when she was the one who needed comfort. But Robert also confessed something far more heartbreaking. Mary knew she was nearing the end, and she accepted it with a quiet resignation that brought tears to those who loved her. One of the final pieces of the mystery surrounding her life came from her own reflections. Mary spent her last months revisiting memories. Her early days in Hollywood, her career breakthroughs, her complicated relationships, and the tragedy of losing her son. She spoke openly about wishing she had been more emotionally present as a mother, wishing she had been brave enough to face the pain she carried for so long, wishing she had allowed herself to be vulnerable instead of always being the strong one. These regrets weighed on her far more heavily than fame or fortune ever had. Yet, even as her body weakened, Mary held on to moments of quiet joy. She loved listening to music, watching old episodes of her shows, and hearing stories from people who had been touched by her work. She cherished these moments because they reminded her that, despite her private pain, she had made a profound and lasting impact on millions of lives. It was the one comfort that never left her. In the final days of her life, Mary was surrounded by softness, dim lights, gentle voices, in the presence of the man who had loved her unconditionally for over 3 decades. She passed peacefully, leaving behind a legacy that still feels impossible to measure. But when the full truth of her final years emerged, fans were shocked. The woman they believed had lived an extraordinary, glamorous life was actually carrying a lifetime of heartache and physical suffering. The mystery was never about scandal. It was about the emotional weight she hid behind a smile that had become iconic. Mary Tyler Moore's story didn't end in the blaze of Hollywood attention she once commanded. It ended quietly, tenderly, and tragically, with a woman who once symbolized independence now relying on others for strength. And yet, there was beauty in that vulnerability. For the first time, Mary allowed herself to be cared for, to be comforted, and to be seen without the mask she had worn for so many years. When the truth finally came out, the world realized something profoundly simple. Mary Tyler Moore had given everything she had to her craft, her audiences, and her legacy. But the price she paid was far greater than anyone imagined. The mystery is finally solved, and it isn't good. It is heartbreaking, deeply human, and a reminder that even the brightest stars carry shadows we never see.